Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. This week we're going to be orienting ourselves to Wix.com, which is an online web design page that is super user friendly, and I hope you can use this as a platform to start thinking through your digital portfolio assignments. Your first portfolio is due this Saturday at 11:55 p.m. And then by Sunday at 11:55 p.m. you can respond to 2 of your peers' portfolio entries that will be posted on Moodle. So when responding to others' posts, think beyond what you liked about something that was said in their post. It's not enough to only say that this idea was interesting or that you liked this idea, but rather in your response, think about how you might enrich an idea that was generated in a post that you're responding to in a way that goes beyond the surface. So your response needs to unpack the how and why something is engaging, what is maybe troubling about this post, what does this post provoke you to think, what connections are you making to the readings, perhaps there's a quote from our textbook that further enhances an idea that's being generated from the post that you're responding to. And your responses in the online dialogues are then intended to grapple with and tease apart some of the ideas that might be difficult in reading the text, and to activate meaning beyond what we already know with dissensus and with dialogue. So in this way, I encourage you to try and unfold some of the layers of what's being provoked in the posts and respond in a way that generates something else. This week you'll post your first digital portfolio entry on the Moodle page. And again, I encourage you to use Wix, which is a free online website design page. It has a lot of templates that lend themselves very well to this frame of work in a very clear and organized way, and it requires little work. But please do refer to the assignment description page for more details on what I'm looking for in your Wix web design. It might take a little while to orient yourself to this website, so be sure to get started on this earlier in the week to figure out some of those like logistical, technical difficulties that you might have, and give yourself enough time to reach out and ask me if you need any help. And I'm happy to support you with that through email, or we can set up a Skype chat. So I'm just going to go over some of my initial thoughts on chapters 1 and 2 of the Stenger's text. As we discussed last week, this book is not about finding solutions. Rather, it's about creating the kinds of conditions and dispositions, ways of thinking that might be needed in times of what Stenger's calls the coming barbarism. So in imagining these dispositions, we also need to be considering what are our responses to this barbarism committed to? What are we grounded in? What is our thinking grounded in? And what might this thinking do? What might these orientations put into the world, and why might it matter? So it's not only enough to think about pedagogy in new ways, but also thinking about how this work might be consequential. What are the effects of these ways of thinking? So something that I invite you to consider this week is, why is it that Stenger's troubles solutions and answers to the catastrophic times in which we live? What happens to thinking processes when solutions are given? And also, what might happen to knowledge if it resists the power of a definition? And this is something that Stenger's offers us this week. So some of the questions that I invite you to think with over the course of this week are, what does catastrophe do to thinking? What does panic do to thinking? And within a time of advanced capitalism and within a neoliberal state, what might solutions smooth over or soothe? And what might solutions generate? What kind of responses are being generated when we're thinking in terms of solutions? Also, how might epistemology, or our ways of thinking, be linked to advanced capitalism in the 21st century? And in reading Stenger's work this week, where do you think these reasonings come from? So looking at the text and what Stenger's is offering to us, where do you think these reasonings come from? Also, what might development-based or progress-driven reasonings resist? What do they make impossible? And what does Stinger's mean by barbarism? How is barbarism situated within Stinger's descriptions of these two histories that she speaks to in chapter 1? And lastly, and I think this is one of the central questions proposed this week in the readings that I hope we can carry on to or hold on to throughout this course, is how might pedagogy inherit a history of struggles undertaken against the perpetual state of war that capitalism makes rule? So this is a question that I think we should hold on to closely. In this week's readings, Stanger suggests that we're living in a time between two histories. She talks about a past that's foregrounded on scientific reasoning, rationalities that rely on codified logics, classification, control, quality, measurement, management, and discourses of governmentality, where a search for truth forms the basis of knowledge making. So considering this logic and the reasonings that grew and continue to grow from this ways of knowing that originated during the Enlightenment period, as we discussed last week, Stangers argues that this orientation to knowledge and the assumption that humans can wholly know something in its entirety poses serious implications in current times. So these modern interests in control and productivity are very visible in some areas of early childhood education. There's a significant amount of work, I think, within this field that maintains a focus on managing human child behavior as a solution to social and environmental problems. Yet considering the precarious social and environmental landscape of the Anthropocene that we discussed last week, Stangers proposes a radical shift in knowledge-making processes and in pedagogy. And she demands sort of a movement away from industrial economic intentions of the nation state, a movement away from thought that lies in a sort of linear trajectory of progress and accumulation. Yet Stangers also warns that capitalism and colonialism have entrepreneurial ways of benefiting from every situation, including supposed curricula and pedagogical reform. So she argues that developmental discourses that are situated in this linear progression don't create the kinds of capacities that are needed to respond to the complexity of current problems. So she traces this intrinsically unstable or unsustainable character of developmentalism, or common knowledge, as she says, as part of this old history. And then she then traces the depth of these ways of knowing, these developmental progress-driven ways of knowing, the depth of those roots and how they live within current times. And she argues that there's sort of this dangerous familiarity of these ways of knowing within changing times that makes new thought impossible. She says that we're living in a time when we have to either grit our teeth in the service of economic growth and throw ourselves to the wall, as she says, or we need to learn to inhabit what henceforth we know, learning that which is in the process of happening to us and also obliges to us. So in this quote, she's proposing a new positionality of the human in the cultivation of knowledge, that it's no longer enough to obtain, classify, and come to know things in the world through old paradigms where this all-knowing human is both at the center of everything and exempt from the effects of this kind of thinking, where knowledge is gained, owned, and sedimented into static terms, where solutions are made, sold, and then pacify the need to think in the thick of things, in the midst of the fleshiness and messiness of the worlds in which we live.